Welcome to Team Performance Coaching. My name is David Hopper, and I have the honor today to be with Bruce Channing. Bruce Channing has been a city manager in Orange County in the cities of Pasadena, Yorba Linda, Laguna Hills. It's been an incredible journey, 41 years. I think for the first question it should be, what does a city manager do?
Yeah, often asked that question, as not many people do know. But the city manager is the equivalent of the chief executive officer in a city organization. So as chief executive officer or city manager, I'm the highest appointed official by the city council. The city council are all lay people who get elected to their job. They appoint me as city manager to be the executive to oversee all of the operations that cities are responsible for. That can vary a lot depending on the nature of the city. Some cities have a full array of services that can include, like in the city of Los Angeles, airports, harbors, beaches, along with all the regular services of police, fire, public works, community development, parks and recreation, and the like. The cities that I've worked for, the last two anyway, Yorba Linda in the 80s and Laguna Hills in the 90s and 2000s, were smaller by nature. They did not have those big responsibilities like airports or harbors. We weren't on the beach, so didn't have that either. But we did have police, fire, public works, community development, parks and recreation.
And you manage...
And somebody has to oversee all of that and make sure that all of those disciplines come together and deliver the services that their community expects.
Are you pretty much their boss, or do you hire companies out? How does that work?
So every city can be different. Some cities are known as contract cities and some are known as full service cities. And the distinction would be contract cities tend to contract with some other private or public entity to deliver service. So as happens here in Yorba Linda and did in Laguna Hills, we contracted with the Orange County Sheriff's Department to provide the police services. And we were a part of the Orange County Fire Authority to provide fire services. But even in saying that, the city manager has an oversight role of the assigned personnel to that city, whether by the fire department or the sheriff's department.
Okay, so even though you're mainly taking care of the contract, you're still also overseeing the services that are provided.
Exactly.
And you have teams that you're leading in those roles.
Yes.
What is the background of most city managers? Because you said appointed, so they're not politicians, right?
No. In fact, try very hard not to be political and not to engage in politics in any fashion. I was on the board of directors for the International City and County Management Association, and part of our code of ethics involves that very thing of a requirement that we stay apolitical. We don't engage in any political activity, support candidates, or show any impression that we favor an elected official or party in any way.
You just want a strong city.
Yeah. So it's all about quality management,
right.
Delivering professional management in the local government environment. Now there are some cities, again Los Angeles or San Francisco being the example, where they have what's known as a strong mayor form of government. So Garcetti is elected, but he's also technically the administrative head of that organization.
Okay.
That's not true in Yorba Linda or most cities. There's about 485 cities in California. There's only a handful that have strong mayor form. Most all of them otherwise operate like Laguna Hills does and Yorba Linda does, Pasadena does, in what's known as the city council, city manager form of government.
So how does that work? How does one city do it one way and have the mayor that's elected, or not the mayor, but the city manager that's elected?
So there's never an elected city manager, but there is an elected mayor, like I said, a strong mayor.
Okay.
And that happens, cities are formed under state law. So by virtue of state law, most all of us are known as general law cities. But the option exists for residents to adopt a charter, and by virtue of that charter, they can design their own approach to governance, which might involve a strong mayor. In some cities, older ones like Pasadena had its own charter, but they chose to go with the council manager form of government and not the strong mayor form of government.
Does that mean the mayor's not elected?
So it means, sometimes it means those mayors are separately elected. Okay. Sometimes it means they are just elected at large as a council member, and then the kind of the typical pattern is that the city council rotates who becomes mayor.
That's what Yorba Linda does?
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. So in your role as the city manager, is it a job posted that you have to get hired in and several people are applying, or?
Yes, it's a very competitive business to get to the point of becoming a city manager. Generally requires a master's degree, in my case in public administration from the University of California, Southern California, USC. Fight on. Yeah, we all got to say that.
Well, they beat my Bulldogs, so I went to Fresno State.
Oh, okay.
And they played the Bulldogs this year.
Yeah.
And I was very sad because thought we had them.
Yes. Well, it hasn't been the best season for us either, but anyway, we did beat the Bulldogs. So
That's right.
About that.
That's right.
But yeah, so typically it's a combination of experience and education that leads to applying for the city manager jobs, and it's not uncommon to be part of a national search to find that individual. And usually starting with a few hundred that may be in an initial pool, but it's whittled down to 10 or so that get interviewed by the city council. They make the choice of the city manager.
Okay, so now that you're in the position, you're overseeing your teams, what is the most valuable trait that you would say you need to have in that role?
So, as I mentioned, there's a wide diversity of disciplines in city management. You have police chiefs, fire chiefs, engineers that are responsible for the public works and maintenance of the city, you have planners that are responsible for the design of the city and the way new development takes place. You have recreation and parks people that are responsible for the both leisure time and aesthetic look of the city in many respects. So you have all these individuals with technical expertise in their discipline that you need to be able to bring together and function successfully as a team to deliver the services that the city council, as the policy setters, have determined that they think are the priorities and important services to have in their community. And of course, since they're elected to office, in theory, they help formulate policy by virtue of their interaction with the community as a whole.
Wow, there's a lot there, and one of the questions that just popped into my head, and I don't even know if it's fair to answer, but the difference of a look of a city. Is this part of it? So when I go through Yorba Linda, it looks dramatically different than when I go through Anaheim. And I'm not saying anything against Anaheim. I love Disneyland. I love everything about it. But you just see a different look. Is that because of something going on in this particular role?
Absolutely. So every city has what they call a general plan. And that general plan is a collaborative effort that is developed at the grassroots initially with the community involvement. It ultimately filters up through the professionals that know how to assemble a plan like that, and then gets in front of some of the boards and commissions that the city council may have established to give input on aspects of that plan, and then ultimately the city council votes and approves that plan. But that general plan has as a component some of the very things you're talking about. What is our look?
Yeah.
And in Yorba Linda, it was decided quite a long time ago that this community had its roots as sort of an equestrian-based community.
Right.
So the trail system and the look of those trails is very important, by design, they're extended throughout the entire community and they follow a specific look. Same with medians and parkways and landscape areas all have what are sort of the Yorba Linda chosen look.
And so you have rules on how far that stuff goes and what you have to have. So again, this might sound disparaging, I don't mean it, it's more out of not knowing. With Anaheim, it's much more of a business, commercial, like just very industrial looking.
Yeah.
Did they come along at some point and say, this is what we're going to be about?
Well, I mean, it's a lot different because Anaheim's, I believe, the oldest city in the county, incorporated city in the county. And so, you know, their look is one that probably has evolved over a very long period of time, since the late 1800s, where Yorba Linda incorporated in the late 60s and had the benefit, if you will, of a blank slate for the most part, to be able to say, as development is going to occur, we want it to have this look. And that's in part why the west end of Yorba Linda does look a little different than the east end. The east end is almost all what would be termed a planned community, where the west end was developed before the city incorporated. So efforts have been made to sort of bring that look into the west side, but it's harder. It takes more time. And if you look at Anaheim and go into Anaheim Hills, you'll see a much different look than you do in West Anaheim or downtown Anaheim or some of the parts just along our border here in Yorba Linda.
So some of that is just the speed of development. But what I think for the leadership aspect of this, it's also the collaboration. You're working with so many groups and you have to get them all on the same page to make these kind of dramatic changes that will beautify and take care of the city. How are you able to collaborate so many entities together?
Yeah, that is part of both the science and the art of city management, as we say. You know, some of it is learned in the classroom and in our professional training. How do you engage the public in an effort or even manage your team towards an outcome? But some of it is more, as I say, in art form. It's what in your own DNA or your own approach to working with people works best for you to help bring them to a point of consensus and support for an idea or a project or a way, a method, if you will, even of getting your goals accomplished. I think it all comes down to the culture you create in your organization. Patrick Lencioni in his book, one of his many books, but in The Advantage, kind of talks about culture and how important that is. You know, culture eats strategy for lunch is, I think, his term. So I tried to create a culture in my organization that was really built around collaboration. Built around trying to recognize the strengths of each of the individuals that are in that organization, helping them to see and understand the sort of the interplay between their discipline and everyone else's, such that collectively we produced an excellent product, or we produced the outcomes we were trying to achieve.
One of the things that I heard you talk about is servant leadership. So what does that look like, servant leadership in your collaboration with your teams?
So I did. I saw my role not just, well, I truly didn't see my role as telling people what to do or being the one with all the knowledge that had to be imparted from on high down to everybody else to carry out. I saw my role as, in the servant leadership context, as being the one to provide the tools and the resources to all of my people so that they could be successful at what they were assigned to do, responsible to do, desiring to do. And in order for us to sort of function as a cohesive team, I needed to understand then, what their needs were, what their strengths were. I like the whole Strength Finders book and approach. And you need to understand then the differences from one person to the next and the kind of a relationship you have to engage in with them in order for them to be successful. But again, I was about trying to help people be the best they could be with the skills and abilities that they bring to the table. I wasn't so much about trying to change people. I was about trying to coach them, coach them along to being a better form of themselves. But I just thought it was important to recognize what their talents were and build on those.
Bring the best out of your team.
Yeah.
When you say servant leadership, that's sort of a Christian term. And you've also been a chair of the elder board at Yorba Linda Church for how many years?
Well, the last couple of years as chair, as the clerk of the board.
The clerk of the board at Yorba Linda Friends Church. How would you say, as you have a very political, even though it's not a political position, but you work for the city, and you're really encouraging servant leadership, how has your faith been played out in a business setting?
Well, that's a great question, because I think who we are as a person speaks volumes to how we relate and with the people we work with on a day-to-day basis, and how they are willing to relate to me is in part a function of what kind of values I express in the way that I lead, what sort of grace I impart to them in the course of them being held responsible for the work they perform, sort of the work ethic that you bring to the office every day, that is a demonstration of again, I think it's a part of who I am as a Christian and a believer, strong believer. I don't have to preach Jesus to my staff for them to know that I trust them, that I love and care for them, that I want the best for them, that I am willing and able to impart grace to them in difficult times, to encourage and support them in their own personal journeys. And if they hopefully see the love of Christ in me carried out in that relationship with them, then I think all the better. But sometimes, there are those ethical moments too, where it has to be clear that I'm drawing a line, if you will, or creating a standard in the culture of our organization that says we're going to be honest, we're going to do things forthrightly, transparently. We are not going to in any way do things that would ever cause us to lose the faith and confidence and trust of the public and our city council.
Yeah.
Because once you lose trust, you can't really deliver on anything else.
So 41 years of city manager and faith, have you ever had anyone push back on that area?
Not insofar as I having to say, hey, my Christian ethics won't allow me to do this.
Okay.
But I have been faced with probably the biggest challenge I faced was when a city council member was actually a candidate for office, and they ran on a platform that was very critical of me personally, insofar as the position that I had and the amount of money I was being paid. And when that individual got elected and came on board to the city council, I had a decision to make. Can I love my enemy? Because this person's coming on with the purpose of trying to get me fired. But they're now my boss. And so for me, that probably was one of the bigger tests of what do I really believe in? What do I really stand for? if I believe what I have learned all my life in reading the Bible, studying the Word, that I'm to love my enemies and treat them with all the dignity and respect that they deserve, even if they are seeking to harm me, to turn the other cheek, if you will, in the midst of that kind of circumstance. Beg the question, can I do it? Will I do it? Or will I fight back, act defensively, seek to undermine their ability to be successful, and all of those kind of things that I could have chosen to do, but for my faith in Christ.
That's fascinating. So how did it play out?
So, much to everyone's surprise, because this was a highly public event. It was being written about in the newspaper, it was being talked about on talk radio, it was making national news literally across the country.
Really?
So everyone was certain that once she came on the city council, my days would be numbered. And we had a difficult go of it for the first year or more.
I'm surprised it's past a year. So how many years were you there?
Well, so I was there for 26. She came on in what was about year 20 of that.
Okay, so a while.
So I did have a lot of credibility, if you will, established, and I did have strong support of other members of the city council, so it wasn't her decision alone to make. She had to get 2 more votes before she would have the ability to terminate me. So in that period of time, while she was trying to get those other 2 votes, I was working hard at helping her see that I was somebody she could work with, that I was somebody she could trust, that I was a professional that knew the business I was hired to deliver and do, and that I was willing, frankly, to be humble and acknowledge that she came in with that objective to get rid of me, and let's just see if we can figure out a way to work together.
And that was an elected role, so in other words, you might have felt that the people were saying you did a bad job.
Oh yeah, they were coming to all the council meetings saying the same thing. And then
So
many of her
really-
supporters were expecting her to take action quickly.
Yeah, you were tested, and your faith was probably tested, and your servant leadership was tested. So what's the final takeaway of how you live out your faith or your servant leadership in the midst of a trial like that?
Well, you find out really quickly when you're under a trial like that, you do come back to, so what do I truly believe? Do I believe God has my interests at heart, and that I can depend entirely and faithfully on Him, irrespective of my circumstance, whether my livelihood is being threatened or not in the professional way? Am I going to let that threat change what I think or how I believe or what I do and how I act? And you also find out who your real friends are in those circumstances. And the church and my small group, my community group, came around me strong. Brothers and sisters in the Lord who prayed with me, supported me, encouraged me through that trial. Those were all very important, but more than anything, I think I had this as most of my upbringing. I've been a Christian all my life, a believer all my life, and I've had a high degree of faith. And so in the midst of that trial, difficult as it was, it never really caused me to lose my faith in God to provide. That something better would come out of it. I would be fine. My family would be fine. Our careers and our jobs are important, but not as much as our relationship with the Lord. And the odd part about that is I wasn't sure, frankly, because of all the negative press, that I would necessarily, if terminated from that job, that I'd ever be able to work in local government again, because it's kind of like, well, who's going to hire me?
Yeah.
But I, again, I learned from, I think, the thing that Christ calls us to do, to humble ourselves, be submissive to authority, and just do the job, and treat that individual with kindness and love and respect that they deserve, whether they like me or not.
So 6 years, the mayor there moved on before you did. Is that how it works?
I actually retired right before she left the council, but we actually we worked it through. We became good friends. At the time of my retirement party, she spoke out loudly and clearly of her admiration for me as a city manager and as a person.
Well, there you go. That is literally the best example we could have given on servant leadership. Not only did you love your enemy, you worked with them, and there's this resolution at the end because you showed such mutual respect.
Yeah.
That is incredible. This has been Bruce Channing. I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you for watching. This is Team Performance Coaching.